Hi everyone, welcome to the Stio Outdoor Apparel and Gear webinar jointly with Celigo. This is a customer integration story in which we want to share regarding how Stio use NetSuite and Celigo in their operations. Today in our webinar, we're joined by Maura Marshall. She's the COO of Stio. And my name is Rico Andrade. I'm the VP of Marketing at Celigo, and I will be asking questions of her experience. Really quickly, just to set a little bit of context, Celigo offers integration solutions for cloud applications, and in particular, we are dominant inside of the NetSuite ecosystem. We've been there for over 10 years with over 1,200 customers, and we provide both pre-configured integrations between popular applications in NetSuite, as well as an integration platform called Integrator.io, which allows you essentially to connect NetSuite to any process on any other cloud application. So this is particularly important for retailers and e-tailers because we have done connections to NetSuite from some of the most popular cloud, best-of-breed cloud applications out there for all sorts of different aspects of their operations, as you can see in this particular slide. So let's jump into Stio specifically and learn more about what they did and how it improved their operations. So Maura, before we begin, can you give us a brief overview in terms of your role at Stio? And for folks who never heard of Stio, give us an introduction to the company and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Maura Marshall, Chief Operating Officer at Stio. I've been with the company since its inception in 2011. Stio is a primarily direct-to-consumer outdoor mountain lifestyle brand. Our first selling season was in 2012, and we primarily sell seasonally in the fall, winter, and spring, summer seasons. So, for example, we've just recently launched our fall, winter 2017 line, and then at the first of the year in 2018, we'll begin to launch spring, summer 2018 line. Stio does have two brick-and-mortar retail stores. Both are in its hometown corporate headquarters of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. One is a small satellite store at the mountain resort, and the other is in downtown Jackson, in the heart of it all. So when I say we're primarily direct-to-consumer, that's how we started our business model. We've recently, actually due to the advent of NetSuite and Celigo, been able to gain brand exposure in some small key retailers and key markets. And primarily at this point, that is a marketing play. Stio is still new to a lot of people out there. And since you don't find us in REI and other large boxes out there, we do find it necessary to be a touch point at some level in another retailer store. So our model is very different than a traditional wholesale, given that our timelines are different considering we're direct to consumer. So financially, it makes sense for Stio the way that we have it currently. We do not look to be getting into any larger wholesale markets, but of course, as the landscape of retail changes, that could certainly change as well. We're about 35 people. Again, as I mentioned, our corporate headquarters are in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, experiencing extraordinarily large growth year over year, which has obviously forced us to staff up, and will continue to staff up and put resources against areas of the business that need it to sustain the growth, which is why I'm here today to talk about NetSuite and Celigo. It was absolutely necessary for us to change our systems and our systemic backbone in order to support growth, omni-channel, and further brick-and-mortar rollouts, which is the plan going forward.
Great. So talk a little bit about the specific challenges and business drivers that led to consideration of Celigo, Celigo integration into NetSuite.
Sure. Well, probably the biggest was inventory and location management. Obviously, the goal of all businesses and retailers is to capture every sale you possibly can. The old way we were running things, and again, it was, we were certainly a startup in 2011, 2012, and 2013, not knowing the success of us or the investment in the into us, it was going to either last or be sustained. We quickly realized that, yes, there was a market for this brand, considering the growth that we were experiencing. So when we were initially set up on our initial budgeted system, I'll call it, because we were under a pretty tight budget, it certainly worked for the first couple of years, but then it was glaring that in order to continue to grow and literally not succeed, we were going to need to leverage inventory in all of our locations, and that it is imperative also as we continue to roll out retail stores that won't be in the hometown and corporate headquarters in different states and cities across the country, to make sure that when an order is placed, it can be fulfilled from any of the locations that we have. So that was one of the biggest reasons that I chose NetSuite to begin with versus some of the other ERP systems that are out there, was its omni-channel inventory visibility, as well as its ease of use being in the cloud. And those are my two primary reasons for choosing that system. Then, obviously, I needed to consider other aspects of the system and how they integrated with my website, which we use Magento as our platform. And knowing that we were going to be on Magento for quite some time, it's not to say in a few years or 10 years we may consider another platform, but it's proven to be a great platform for us, and it's not going anywhere. So I needed to find the best integration tool that would allow me to utilize NetSuite the way I needed to, and Celigo filled that hole.
So talk a little bit more about that selection process. You know, what other considerations, you know, were you looking at, and what ultimately made you decide to go with the Celigo integration?
Sure. Well, I would say that the biggest challenge that we had with our old system that I needed to make sure that we overcame in the future of Stio was the visibility to our integration. We really had none of that. And likewise, we did not have good support. So the combination of those two was really challenging. When things went wrong, and it's not to say when things necessarily went wrong with those systems specifically, but we all know that whenever you make changes, there's going to be a domino effect somewhere. For example, this week we switched over servers and changed an IP address, and we're just cleaning up a little bit of the things that got a little hiccuped because of that IP address change, even though we prepared as much as we possibly could. So we're constantly optimizing our systems, which means changes are happening, and we need the support and visibility to make sure that when we do make changes to the certain aspects of the business, that everything continues to flow. And obviously the primary is orders flowing into the system and being able to charge customers. So because I didn't have that visibility / lack of support in the beginning of Stio, there were definitely lost sales for much larger periods of time than we would have now. It's hard to quantify that from a dollar perspective, but because I can easily log into Celigo's Integrator IO or my integrated NetSuite dashboard, either one, I can monitor flows, monitor integration, see when there are real-time errors and fix them immediately versus waiting a day or waiting a time zone change, which is what used to happen, or even longer than that given lack of response time. So I would say that the visibility to the integration was huge, and then the real-time inventory sync between the two systems that you can certainly trust is managed well were the two largest reasons why I chose Celigo. In terms of due diligence, I reached out to a lot of other customers, and I did look at a couple of different integrations, including potentially a custom one, which we obviously decided not to go with. And I always do a ton of references, whether it's, integration or the system itself, and obviously I did the same thing for Celigo, and I certainly got the best references. And a couple of the other system, the custom system was going to be pretty expensive, and then there were some other ones that I vetted that were surprisingly cheap, which is a great thing, but at the same time, they didn't get as good of references, and so it's a little bit of people probably just got what they paid for, and didn't have that great support. And then support was another huge reason that I chose Celigo, and this was based on customer research, references and research, is how they're supported, what kind of levels of support are out there, what they're doing to improve their support, were all key factors.
So talk a little bit about, once a decision was made, what was your integration process like, implementation of Celigo?
Sure. Well, right away when we made the decision, signed the statement of work, I was immediately given 2 key implementation specialists that were going to see me through the process. I have 2 contacts that I still continue to have, even though I'm not in integration anymore. But I was a little skeptical at the beginning. I'm not going to lie, because they were based overseas, which I totally understand. But I wanted to make sure that, because I didn't want to run into what I ran into in the past with time changes and lack of response. But they immediately dispelled any hesitations that I had. They were great from the very, very beginning, helping me understand how implementation was going to go, what to expect, what to do when we had issues along the way. We tracked everything in a very, very thorough Google Doc that was constantly monitored and managed by both them and myself and my team. And anytime that we always had a weekly call. In fact, I think in the beginning it was probably twice a week, and then it went to weekly. But we always had a weekly call, and if anything came up in between those calls, they were ready to get on the phone at any time. I would say, aside from the fact that they were extraordinarily smart and knew what they were doing, which having that is obviously huge, considering I was a new customer and new to the system itself. What was I going to say? They just followed through with everything really, really well. So I owe a lot of our success at going live with our ERP system to these 2 fellows in India, and providing such great support along the way.
So give us a sense now about the key capabilities that you have gained at Stio because of Celigo.
Sure. So the real-time flows are obviously very, very, very big. So automating orders and fulfillment and having all of that run as it's supposed to run. Obviously, from time to time, something comes up and we address and fix it. But the daily operations they just are. And so that sounds like a very simple thing, but sometimes they just aren't, and so I don't have to really worry about it. I check integration because I can, again, visibility, and I have points along the way that I make sure things are running properly, but I don't have to think about it every day, and I used to have to think about it every day. And that's tough when you're running an e-commerce business, to question whether your inventory is accurate, to question whether, when you get something in stock, does it immediately populate to the website? That's another huge bonus that Celigo has provided to Stio. And again, it seems silly to have to think about that stuff, but we used to have to think about it / work on it a whole lot more. So now when something does come into stock, and we all know is all very urgent when that happens, I can trust that it populates the website and somebody can place an order immediately and not have to think about whether or not that works. Again, visibility to integration is huge. I think a lot of people take that for granted, whether they have it or not. And being able to see real time if something is wrong is a huge benefit to the business to keep it running properly. As COO, that I couldn't highlight that anymore. And then again, the support is we have a little bit of a higher level plan that I've chosen to purchase, which certainly didn't break the bank. And I continue to have weekly calls, no longer with implementation specialists because they're done with their project, but with my account manager. Actually, it's two. And again, they're in a different time zone, but it does not matter. They make the time work for whatever works for me and not in the standard time. And again, we started those calls out at the beginning 3 times a week. We're now down to just 1 because there's less and less and less that we kind of have to hash out. And now I'm going to be using them to learn more about the system in terms of how much more it can do for me. We use Celigo to connect ERP to website, but I don't do, you know, I'm not connected to Amazon, or I'm thinking of changing our retail system, and how is that going to connect, whether it's Shopify. So I'll continue to optimize using Celigo, considering I've been so satisfied with our initial integration. And then lastly, because Celigo has this data loader component to the system, it's quite a bonus if you're using NetSuite, because there are, again, we all know there's no perfect system, and that's why we're trying to link all these pieces together to do the best we can. But there are things that NetSuite can't do, and we know that there are just systems that can't do everything. And Celigo provides a nice platform that allows you to do things that NetSuite can't. And one of those areas is the data loader, and that's so big for us because we import transfer orders, which is essentially an internal purchase order, all the time, and probably a dozen a day. And Celigo easily lets us do that, and allows our business just to flow so much quicker, because if we didn't have that, we would have to manually enter those transferred orders into NetSuite, and it would be probably a dedicated resource, probably an employee.
Do you have a sense where you are today if the Celigo integration wasn't implemented? What sort of resources, what sort of time constraints would be draining from your organization to be doing what Celigo does today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest areas that we leverage out of NetSuite is the location assignments. So rather than just have one location where inventory comes from, we have many locations, down to the fact that we can see, I mentioned a couple key retailers have Stio product in it. So for example, we can see if there's an inventory item at a store in Bozeman, Montana, for example, if there, and so we can truly fulfill from wherever we want, as long as we've set the location up and the inventory is there. Before, we could not do that. And so if we had not implemented Celigo and NetSuite together to make that information flow, we would not be in key retailers. We would also not have global inventory and visibility across our retail stores, which is part of Stio's business. I think inventory is if not the biggest part of an e-commerce business, and it's we all know it's just pure cash that you've paid for. So and being able to get your cash out of that inventory item as quickly as possible is the ultimate goal, and we weren't doing that, and we would not be doing that if we didn't have Celigo. Again, it's hard to quantify what missed sales might have been, but we certainly wouldn't be able to sustain growth and satisfy the customer experience without it.
So looking back at your experience, in this journey that you embarked in, and perhaps, if you had some advice that you would give yourself, when it first started, or for someone who's in a similar position at looking at, say, an e-commerce to NetSuite integration, what sort of things do you think you would have told yourself, or what sort of advice would you give for folks about to do, try to solve the same problem as you're solving?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest takeaway is to be very thorough. Whether it's Celigo, NetSuite, or something else that you're doing when it comes to migrating to an ERP, starting an ERP, starting a business, any of those tasks, is to be very thorough. Do your due diligence, and make sure you understand what you need as a business. So for Stio, I knew it was the direct-to-consumer model. I knew it was the customer experience. We manufacture and purchase our inventory, so I knew inventory management was huge, and I knew brick-and-mortar retail was part of the business and the future on the horizon. So being very thorough about what the business needs, you know, and you have to be objective too when you're talking to other customers, because it may something may work for them, but they may have a totally different business model. So being very, very, very thorough. You know, making sure that you document your steps along the way. I basically have a integration Bible that I created along the way that I could probably literally hand to somebody to help them integrate NetSuite+Celigo, the website, everything, to just make, because there's so much going on in such a pretty brief period of time that you forget things that you've done and why you've done them. And like I said at the beginning of the call, everything cascades. So understanding what affects what, if you make a change, if you make an addition, if you take something away, all of that is really important, because if you don't know what those steps are, you're just going to run into circles and trying to figure out what's either wrong or what's changed and why. It's a very complex project, so making sure you document it is key. And then, you know, keeping all the key players in play. And that's another thing I should have mentioned about my implementation team at Celigo. One of the biggest challenges with projects like this are to keep all of your third parties aligned. You know, some people are in India, people are in South Carolina. I'm just speaking from my experience. You know, everyone's, I mean, I'm in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and being able to get, there are times where you literally need to get every single piece on a call, and this Celigo implementation team was so good about that. And, you know, and again, I said they were in India, but it didn't even matter. They would get on any call, even just to support me if I was nervous about something, and I just asked them to be there just in case there was a question. They would have no problem doing it, and there were many times where they would sit on the call and there would be nothing to address to them, but I just wanted them there in case. So that's another thing I want to mention about the implementation team. But keeping those key partners in play is really important. There are many times to get frustrated, and it's not to get frustrated at your partners, because everyone is trying to reach the same goal. There are just a lot of times some things that are out of everybody's control. So keeping those third-party integration people all aligned is a big deal. And then again, back to the thorough. Don't rush. That's another thing I would tell anyone with a project like this. If you're never going to feel 100% ready, because it's nerve-wracking and it's very stressful, and you've put a lot of work into going live. But if you're not ready, you're going to know it, and so don't do it, because that's when I've heard of projects like this failing. Down to the fact that I've literally heard of businesses going out of business because it did not go well, and they just couldn't clean up. They could not clean up. So if you're not ready, you know, don't go live until you really feel that you've done everything you can to make this go smooth. Yeah, and you know, in terms of, I've mentioned this earlier, but in terms of understanding your integration, I highly, highly, highly suggest that you have visibility, because that's just going to make operations run so much more smooth.
Excellent, thank you. So what's next in terms of your NetSuite integration, or what's next with Celigo perhaps in the plans? Is there something perhaps you're doing in terms of omni-channel and integration or increased visibility?
Yeah, the biggest benefit that Celigo and NetSuite have given Stio is, you know, omni-channel inventory, sales, and fulfillment visibility. The ability to fulfill from wherever we want, to capture that sale regardless of where inventory lives, and really capture the customer experience and satisfying the customer regardless. So we've been on our system for almost a year now, and we're constantly fine-tuning processes, ways we're using it, changing ways we're using it, adding in ways we're using it constantly. It's and I don't see an end to that, to be quite honest. I know that Celigo has integrations for a lot of other a lot of other areas of retail that I would certainly love to explore, whether it be Amazon or eBay, or I mentioned potentially switching our retail POS. So, whether that's Lightspeed or Shopify, and then exploring how we can continue to optimize supply chain. Whether it's through PL Connect or Amazon fulfillment, whatever it might be. Those are bigger questions for the company. And back to kind of a little advice and takeaway from rolling out ERP and going live is another, for example, the CEO who's my boss, he's definitely more on the creative side. He loves the marketing and the design, and he just lets me run the ops. He wants everything all at once, of course, because what CEO doesn't. But you can't do it all at once. So, when we were going live, he forgets, and he's just kind of one of those creative guys. Well, why are we using Amazon, or are we using eBay, or what's the status of PayPal? Stuff like that. And for go live, keep it simple. Make sure that your business is just operating. You don't have to do it all at once. And so that's what I'm kind of doing now. I'm layering in all these other benefits to the system and leveraging Celigo and NetSuite further and further. So we didn't have PayPal in our old system, so now we have PayPal, and that happened I don't know, 6 months ago. So kind of understanding what else we can do to further optimize how Stio operates, and continue to be a big player out there. I mean, Amazon is obviously the cream of the crop out there, and we all use that as our barometer, so we need to continue to be competitive.
Well, thank you so much. That was incredibly insightful. Appreciate you taking the time, and appreciate you being a wonderful Celigo customer. And
Absolutely.
For folks who have any questions, please do reach out. Go to celigo.com on our website and learn more, and fill out any contact information. And we hope to see you again very soon to learn more about NetSuite integrations. Thanks again, and have a good day, everyone.